Hello, I am Cory Kerr, and this is Illo Talk, 100 Days of Animation, Day 66. I feel like I should do something on the double digits, like 11 and 22 and 33. But I haven't been, so you get nothing special. Just another video. But before that, intro music. I want to talk about something that I find super interesting and is kind of weird, and I have found that a lot of creatives deal with it, and that is imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is having trouble accepting your successes, and then you downplay your wins and internalize your failures, otherwise known as being an artist or writer. Anyway, when you view life through this lens of imposter syndrome, any achievement or success is downplayed as coincidence or the result of not me, right? That happened because the planets aligned or certain people were doing something that made that work, or you just happened to be in the right place at the right time or whatever, something like that. Could have happened to anybody. But failures, that's all you 100% of the time. No doubt you screwed that up. That was yours. And so, in other words, someone dealing with imposter syndrome can only fail while others succeed around them, which is kind of interesting, right? And I think there's a difference between dealing with and succumbing to imposter syndrome. And I always use the example of Beautiful Mind, right? The guy, brilliant mathematician, has paranoid schizophrenia, and he sees things that are not there. Specifically, there are two or three characters that he sees that he eventually finds out are not real. And in any case, he has this moment where he's explaining how he's dealt with this, and he says, well, the thing is this, right? They are an appetite like anything else, and any appetite can either be starved or fed, and I choose not to feed that appetite. And so while it is constantly there, it is not strong because I don't feed it. And so I think the main difference between dealing with those thoughts and feelings is you say, these are not logical, they are not real, and I do not accept it. It doesn't make them go away. It just kind of takes the wind out of their sails, and it takes their power away. And so when I have these thoughts, I'm able to identify them, and then I kind of bag them and tag them as imposter syndrome, and I'm able to put them off to the side. Most of the time. Sometimes I don't. But I think this is a really normal thing. And there's some things that are really interesting about it, because the irony of it is that they have done studies, and most creatives have, to some degree, some level of imposter syndrome. Like, they feel like they're the only one in the room that's faking it. So think about that situation. You have a room full of creatives, and most of them are thinking that they are the only one that feels this way. Ironically, statistically, that doesn't work, right? And so you look around the room and you are worried that you're going to be found out as an imposter. What if people find out that I don't do this or whatever, right? And it's very common amongst creatives, especially those whose work can be seen publicly. Unfortunately, imposter syndrome has its roots in a person's accurate self-perception that they have room to grow and improve, meaning that I know that my work could be better, and my imposter syndrome takes that knowledge that is true. It's a fact. It could always be better, but so can people who have been doing this for 20 years longer than I have. What is that demotivator? The path to quality is more like a death march, right? You are always going to find that you have room to improve. And as soon as you think that you're done improving, or that your work is good enough, perfect, and has no flaws, you're dead in the water. You have stagnated, and you're not going to do anything new. And so it is a valuable feeling to feel that I could be better, to recognize that there are parts of my work that are flawed and could use improving. But you want to feel that to the point that it motivates you to continue to improve and continue to hone your craft, but not to the point that it's demotivating to the point where you just give up and you feel like, well, I'm a fraud and I'm faking it and I'm not worth it anyway, and so I can't do it, right? And so someone deluded enough to think that they are perfect has hubris enough to stop them from improving and make them immune to imposter syndrome, right? They don't have imposter syndrome, but they're also not improving. And so that's a problem. And so I think a constant healthy evaluation of the quality of work we're producing is a major key to the growth and improvement. But it can trigger imposter syndrome. And someone with imposter syndrome often takes on the full force of failures around them, but denies and rationalizes away successes, right? And so if I make something and it's a flop because it's bad, that is completely on me. But if I make something and a bunch of people like it and it sells a bunch, or whatever measure of success I'm going with, whatever, I might have just hit that at the right time of day or the zeitgeist or whatever. It's a bunch of confluence of events, and I write that off as something not to do with me, right? And so I think what one of the major things that helps with this is that you take responsibility for the results of your actions, right? And taking the responsibility for the results of your actions includes being responsible for the success that you have as well as the failures that you have in equal measure, right? And you don't weight one over the other. And, or if anything, you weight the success just a little bit more than the failures, because you don't want to completely ignore the failures, but you want enough motivation to go on. And art is hard. It's emotionally exhausting. It is physically taxing in a way that is kind of confusing because it feels very sedentary and that you're just sitting a lot. But there is a physical and emotional and spiritual and intellectual drain when you are producing something that has value enough and stretching and working and striving, right? Those are all very hard things. And so taking responsibility is something that can trigger imposter syndrome, but it's also very, very good, right? And so the problem with imposter syndrome is that it comes because of the magnification of good things, like understanding that your work can improve and taking responsibility for the results of your actions, and things like that. Nobody wants to work with somebody who never admits when they're wrong and constantly places blame. But those people who never admit that they're wrong, they don't deal with imposter syndrome because they're not taking responsibility for their actions, right? And it's a problem. So I'm not claiming to have any answers, but for me and my imposter syndrome, I've found that categorizing imposter syndrome is a start. And at the very least, I remember going through this when I first started getting really into art. I remember feeling like I was the worst artist on the planet, and that I was assaulting people's eyes, and that I didn't deserve to even show my stuff online, and that there were so many people out there that were so much better than me, that who was I to teach or to draw or whatever. And there were times where I felt like people that tell me that they like my art, I've tricked them, I've fooled them. I feel so bad for them not understanding that I am terrible, and somehow that I've perpetrated a fraud on the public or whatever. And the problem with that thinking is it's not true. If somebody likes what you've done, let them. That's okay. You've done something that connects with somebody, and that's fine. You haven't tricked them. There's nothing to that, right? And so I don't actually think that there is a viable cure for imposter syndrome. And that's mainly because I am unwilling to avoid responsibility for my actions, and I am unwilling to fool myself into thinking that my work is perfect and can't improve. And so because I take responsibility for what I do and what I produce, and because I am willing to look at my work and say, this could be better in these ways, I open myself up to imposter syndrome. And so anyway, I've found that talking about this is helpful. And for me, when I first came across this, it was like this revelation, just this pure, soothing balm from heaven fell from the sky. And That sounds weird and wet and gross. But there was something that was really helpful in understanding that this is a thing that can be categorized and it's understood and it is common. I was able to say, okay, I'm going to beautiful mind that stuff, bag it and tag it and put it off to the side. It doesn't make it go away. It just makes it not important. And I'm not able to do that 100% of the time. Even recently, within the last couple of days, I got extremely discouraged with what I was doing with this project, and it kind of just weighed on me for a little while. And then and I'm sitting here going, I'm making these videos, and I'm showing, all of this warts and all. I mean, it took me, 3 times as long as it should to do that thing that I was doing, and at the end of it, I didn't even like it, and that's okay. The trick is that I need to recognize, okay, there's improvement. I'm responsible for that improvement, but I have still made significant improvements, and I've had a number of successes. And so I need to accurately balance those things out. So in any case, I bring the subject up for 2 reasons. One reason is I find it really helpful to talk about for me personally. But I've also noticed that as I've talked to younger creatives, students or whomever, and I tell them, I think you might be dealing with imposter syndrome. You can improve. Sure. You need to take responsibility for the work that you're doing, but that doesn't mean that you're a terrible, awful fraud that, is horrible and doesn't deserve to do this. Don't rage quit your art because you've hit a roadblock. I've found that categorizing it, naming it, explaining some of the symptoms, that there's this catharsis, there's this level of, oh my gosh, that is what that is, right? I'm not a crazy person. I'm not horrible. This is something that is just part of the creative process. It's part of the journey. And honestly, this is something that I warn people against. Being a creative is hard because you have to expose things about yourself to yourself and others to make good things that are uncomfortable. And it's a very visible process, right? For the most part, I can't walk by an accountant's work and look at it and go, and make a value judgment on their work at a glance, right? But people who create visuals for a living, our stuff is out there and you can look at it and go, I don't like that. I do like that, right? There's this immediate judgment that you can make that doesn't come in a lot of different occupations. And so there's this risk of vulnerability in this. And along with that comes, the downsides of being vulnerable. But you also have the upsides of being vulnerable. I think the more that you risk, the more that you stand to reap those rewards. There's an opposition in this universe, and in that opposition, the greater the positive, the greater the potential negative, and vice versa. And so, the black are the blacks, the white are the whites. It's that contrast in life that allows, things. If we were all just in limbo, and it wasn't bad, but it wasn't good, then you wouldn't have this idea of contrast, right? And so I don't appreciate my health until I've been sick for a little while. And then I'm like, oh man, I'm so glad I'm not vomiting right now. But it's not like recently, I haven't vomited in years. It's not like recently I've been like, man, I'm really excited that I'm not vomiting right now because I don't have anything to contrast that against. And so that's the upside to this creative journey, is that those that choose to be vulnerable and risk, yes, they have to deal with negativity, and they have to deal with self-doubt, and they have to deal with sometimes depression and anxiety, and sometimes, imposter syndrome and those type of things. But on the flip side of that, there is in equal measure this fulfillment that comes from being able to create and make something from nothing and express yourself in a way that is instantly recognizable. And those things are powerful. And for some of us, and I don't think this is for everybody, but for some of us, you have to do that to feel whole And if you're not doing that, then there's an emptiness or there's something lacking. This is starting to feel really flowery and I don't know, whatever. It's weirdness, right? But from an existential standpoint, you're judged by your actions. And if your actions are producing something of value, then that is valuable to society and you're a valuable individual. And so that is something that I value in my life. And so because of that, I have to take risks and I have to feel vulnerable and I have to show people my work, even if it is flawed. And all of it is flawed. And so the imposter syndrome, inner critic in my head is constantly there, and the struggle is to not feed it. So anyway, I'm not really going anywhere with this rant, but since I just had a bout of this as I tried to make that butterfly fly, and it ended up looking kind of like garbage and really jilted and stiff, it was on the top of my mind. So anyway, I am curious though, those of you that are creative or not, if you have dealt with imposter syndrome and if you knew what it was before this, and if you have any ways to combat that in your mind or in your life, and if you didn't know what it was, does knowing what it is now and having it explained to you, does that help? I'm curious. In the comments, let's discuss imposter syndrome a little bit. I think it's important to understand. Anyway, I'm Cory Kerr. You can catch my stuff at kuretake.com, and I will be doing stuff with my store soon. I promise. I've just been really busy. But I have some new things that I want to show you guys. And within the next couple of days, I'm going to be releasing some new designs that I have in my brain, and I'm super excited about them. I sketched them out on a whiteboard earlier today, and they're going to be cool. So somehow I just have to carve out the time to do them because I need to get them done in the next couple of days. So in any case, yeah, that's that. So go check that out. Leave a comment, subscribe, hit that like button, share these videos if you like it. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram and whatnot, and go be awesome and own your successes as much or slightly more than you own your failures. I'm out.